Thank you, and welcome once again. I'm going to read this disclaimer for us, and we are here at the So You Want to Get Your LLC session 2 of our legal series. No liability is assumed with respect to the use of information presented in this session. The information is intended for educational purposes only and should not be considered as providing legal advice. Laws may be amended and court rulings made that could affect a particular procedure, issue, or interpretation that may be included in the session. Neither of the professionals on this call nor Webeck East instructors or authors assume responsibility for errors or omission, nor any liability for damages resulting from the use of information contained herein. Please contact your local solicitor or attorney for legal advice. All right, we have that behind us, and now we can begin our session. I am going to do, once again, for the sake of the recording, introduce Melanie McLeod and Elliot Gilkison to the call, in addition to Sherry Andrews and Franny Riley. I'm going to tell you a bit about Webeck East. We are a nonprofit founded in 1995 that provides support to women entrepreneurs, providing economic self-sufficiency and in the form of entrepreneurship. We provide workshops such as this. We provide one-on-one counseling through our fantastic business counselor, Melanie McLeod, in addition to on-demand learning that is self-paced through ed2go.com. If you want to learn more about us, you can go to webeckeast.com. If you want to learn more about our events, we will have some links for you at the end of the session. With that being said, I would love to have Sherry and Franny please introduce yourselves, and we'll start with Sherry.
So good evening, everyone. I'm Sherry Andrews. I am a small business and trademark attorney. I kind of have to do everything differently. So I am a solo practice, virtual practice attorney, which basically means it's just me. There's no receptionist, there's no secretary, there's no anybody else. And I meet all my clients on Zoom. So I can, with the licenses I have, represent anyone in Pennsylvania or Maryland. And basically, I have set myself up the way I have because I ran throughout my legal career a number of side hustles, a number of small businesses. I know what small business owners face when they're trying to set up, when they're trying to run, when they're trying to make sure that they're legally protected. And I really saw a void in the legal industry for providing services for that particular group and wanted to step in and fill that void and make sure that women who otherwise might not talk to an attorney had the opportunity to do so. That's what really got me going in this third phase of my career. And I'm happy to be here. Look forward to sharing information with you tonight.
Thank you, Sherry. Franny.
Great. Thanks, Joyce, and thanks, Sherry. And thank you to everybody for joining us this evening. My name is Franny Riley, and I am a member with McNeese, Wallace, and Nurick. I co-chair our Public Finance and Government Services Practice Group, and am also the chair of our ESG group and our nonprofit practice group. Prior to joining McNeese, I actually was I was also a solo practitioner. So I worked at a large firm in Philly for a number of years. And during one crazy snowstorm, when I couldn't get the train, had 4 kids at home and was trying to figure it out and closed a large deal for my home office, I realized that I could do this on my own. So I started my own practice, and then from there, so, I always joke that I was remote working before remote working was something that was relatively cool. And I was certified through Webeck East. And, and just really enjoyed the opportunities that I had as being certified through Webeck East. It was through that I was able to continue doing the public finance deals that I did. So a lot of these larger deals, bigger law firms look to partner with smaller law firms. And so through that opportunity, I continue to maintain great relationships with people at McNeese, and then they asked me to join as a member with them. So I definitely give a lot of credit to WeBank East for having this particular type of certification and, allowing me to continue doing the very sophisticated work that I enjoy doing with a large firm, but with the ability to do it as a solo practitioner. So that's my, connection to WeBank East.
Thank you. Thank you, Franny, and thank you both for being here tonight. To everyone in the audience, as you know, this is a series. And during the last session, we talked about uh, a wide variety of topics from business structure and formation to reduction of liability through insurance. We even talked a little bit about some intellectual property trademarks, in addition to working with staff and employment law and hiring. These next two sessions, meaning today's and next week's, will dive a little bit deeper into two topics. Today's topic is getting your LLC, and we'll talk about what are the different types of business entities entrepreneurs should know about, in addition to the difference between an LLC and other types of entities, etc. And in our next session next week, we're going to go deep into hiring your very first employees and the legal requirements around that. So I'm excited to dive in deep a little bit today on the LLC. And so I'm going to jump in with the very first question. So the first question, and by the way, to those of you in the chat that have put questions in, thank you. We see them and we're definitely going to get to them throughout the conversation. So the first question I have is, what are some of the different business entity types and those that the entrepreneur should be aware about in addition to the LLC? And can we talk about that? And we'll start with Sherry.
Sure thing. So to start with, a lot of small business owners start as a sole proprietor if there's just one of you, or a partnership if there's none of you. Basically, that's the default. That's what happens if you start a business and you don't file anything with the state. You're either a sole proprietor or you're a partnership. The problem with sole proprietor or partnership is that all of your personal assets are at risk in that type of an entity. So if you have bank accounts, if you own a home, if you have 401k accounts, if you have a car, if you have artwork, any of those kind of things could be at risk if your business is sued. So we move from sole proprietorship and partnership into, let's talk about LLC, which is a really good choice for many small business owners. From a tax perspective, the LLC works exactly the same as the sole proprietorship or partnership. It's still passed through taxation. You're still filing a Schedule C, but you have created a separate entity, a separate legal entity that keeps you as a person over here and you as a business over here, and separates them so that those personal assets that you have then are not attachable in the event that your business is sued. And that's the main purpose of an LLC. The other advantage to an LLC is then when your business takes off and you start actually making money and you're doing well, you can elect to be taxed as an S Corp. And at that point, pay yourself a salary and take advantage of a lot of other tax advantages that come with that. And the final big one for small business owners is a C Corp. And it's not the place most people start, but it's a good place to start if you need investor funding, if you plan on getting really big and going IPO one day, then you want that type of structure.
And I was going to say, Sherry brings up such a great point, is that when you're forming this new business, it's crucial to think about it in terms of silos. So you have to think of it as a separate entity. So this isn't just an extension of you as an individual. This is a completely separate entity. So you file for what's called an EIN, which is your employer identification number. So even if you don't have any employees, you want to make sure that you have the separate EIN so you can open a bank account, so that you can get a credit card, so that you can, again, keep all of your finances separate for this LLC. So again, think of it in terms of silos. So if you're running to Target, because with 4 kids, I'm pretty much there on a daily basis. I would say, am I here to buy something for me as a person or for me as a family? Or, for example, am I buying office supplies? So if I'm buying something for me, I'm going to be using my own personal debit card. If I'm going to be if I'm buying something for the office, I'm going to be using the debit card for the office. And that way you can make sure that you are very clear about which account you're using. So the issue that comes about with LLCs and when people start LLCs is if you start treating them like your own personal bank account. So if you go to Target, you buy envelopes for the office and you buy, detergent for yourself, and you just say, well, I'll just use the office card. The problem with that is that you really start to detract from the importance of having this separate legal entity. So if you don't treat it like a separate legal entity, you run the risk of what's called piercing the corporate veil, which just means that if someone were to sue you, and if someone were to say, if you were to say, hey, wait a second, I've got this LLC, I've got the liability protection. If someone were to question what your expenses are, and someone were to look and say, hey, wait a second, you're a law firm, why are you buying detergent? There's going to be some questions as far as what those expenses are and whether you're actually maintaining it as a separate corporate entity.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those. That example was great, and we appreciate the definitions there. Um, Going into the next question, this actually piggybacks off of this first question. How is an LLC different from some of the entity categories? So, for example, you mentioned sole proprietorship. There's S corp. There's other entity types. How does the LLC? How is it differentiated? And which, I guess, follow up to that would be which type of entrepreneur or which type of industry would want to consider an LLC? Anyone can jump in for this one.
All right, well, I'm happy to give my thoughts on this because I love to use the example of saying, unless you're in a zero liability zone, you really want to have an LLC or a C Corp. You don't want to be a sole proprietor. And when I say zero liability zone, I'm talking about the chances that you're going to get sued are so minuscule that you don't need the protection. And what kind of business would that be? Well, think about this. Suppose you make beautiful handmade greeting cards and you sell them on Etsy. So you go through the work of making the cards, you put up pictures on Etsy, somebody comes in and places an order, you package it up and fulfill the order, they get their cards. The worst thing that's going to happen in this transaction is they're going to get a paper cut, right? And most people aren't going to sue you over a paper cut. So you're really in a very, very low liability situation with that type of business. And in that type of business, you may be perfectly happy just being a sole proprietor and never going through all of that. You still need to do what Franny was talking about, keeping your business expenses and your personal expenses completely separate for IRS purposes, but you don't necessarily need to worry about protecting your personal assets and that coverage. Anytime you're in a business where what you do or the products you offer could affect someone's physical health, financial health, mental or emotional health, you're not in a zero liability zone. You're suddenly in a zone where that LLC protection becomes important. And that's where I like to differentiate between sole proprietorship and LLC is, do you need the liability protection or don't you? And that's really, I know a lot of small businesses will try to fly under the radar for years. And I mean, I know of plumbers and electricians where they're flying under that radar and working as sole proprietors. And I really think that's a huge mistake, that they need that LLC protection. But, that's my legal opinion, and not necessarily everybody has to agree with me on that. That's where I draw kind of that differentiation, if that helps.
And I will say, I think more and more we are living in a very litigious society. And so even taking the greeting card example that Cherry had put out there, let's say, for example, you've been hired through Etsy to put together wedding invitations, and you put the, you engrave that, you put them together, you send them out, and there's a mistake and there's something wrong, and the wedding invitation doesn't get sent out on time, and nobody shows up at the wedding. I mean, we could go on, and now all of a sudden you're getting sued for a simple mistake that you made. And even though you say, well, it was a mistake, I didn't mean to, I didn't realize that, this Saturday isn't the 22nd. I thought it was the 23rd. It's still considered negligence. And so you could still potentially be held liable for it. So, again, whenever I'm approached by a client, I'm always working to tell them, you need to be protected. You need to protect yourself. Is it, are you willing to lose your house over, potentially $125 filing fee, and filing with the Pennsylvania Department of State? So while there are expenses and things like that that come with forming the LLC, I think that, taking a step back and just think about what is the most ridiculous scenario, just like I said, the wedding invitation scenario, those are things that actually happen. And so again, I have clients who have said, I can't sleep at night with the idea that I could potentially be sued. I could potentially lose my house. And so again, moving towards this LLC, is the best idea. And so, I think that one of the questions that I frequently get asked is just, why an LLC versus a C Corp? So I have people come and they're just like, we want to file a C Corp in Delaware. And so, I'm like, well, you live in Pennsylvania, so why would you want to file in Delaware? And why would you want to file a C Corp? And they're like, well, that's what I hear is what, I Googled it. That's what everybody does, is file a C Corp in Delaware. So we start talking about it. And, again, filing in Delaware when you have no, what they call nexus, which means like you have no connections to Delaware. You have additional expenses. So you then have to pay to have what's called a registered agent in Delaware, which just means it's an entity that'll accept, if you get sued or something like that in Delaware, you have to have a physical address in Delaware, but then you also have to be registered to do business in Pennsylvania if that's where most of your business is going to take place. So now you're adding on to your expenses when you don't necessarily need to. The idea of, a C Corp versus an LLC. Well, so it's funny to think about it, but in the legal sense, we don't change laws all that frequently. So the LLC, at least when I started practicing, was kind of relatively a new concept. So it was the best of both worlds. It was the benefits of being a sole proprietor from a taxation perspective, with the benefits of, being able to protect oneself in having a corporate entity similar to a C Corp. So it was that unique blend of it. So there was a question, will most states accept it? It's relatively new, is it going to be, will it hold up in a court of law as being this legal entity? Well, we're pretty much removed from that at this point. And so the LLC is a quick way. You don't have to have a board of directors. You don't have the double taxation that a C Corp could bring. You don't have an additional filing that, having to make the S election to do an S Corp brings. So again, it really is, it's a very nimble way in which, smaller businesses or businesses that are just starting can establish themselves as a separate legal entity without a lot of, additional work that a corporation requires.
Thank you both for sharing that. Such deep insights there. Elliot, did you want to add anything to that?
Just an example for the group. So when I was starting my company, I had a lot of friends who were in that kind of more creative retail area that Sherry was talking about with her example. And they were like, "Oh, don't bother with an LLC. Like, you just want a sole proprietorship, a sole prop." And I was like, "But I'm in people's houses cleaning them, and like these big old West Philly houses that." If I make a mistake and I mess up someone's like 200-300-year-old hardwood floors, I'm going to be liable for that. So I got the LLC after talking with the experts, my accountant and my business attorney. And my accountant pointed out that just from a taxation point, the LLC is really great for when you're first starting off, because like Franny and Sherry said, it's pass through taxation. And then she was like, if you want to grow to the point where you're looking at like $150,000-$200,000 revenue, that's when you should start to consider the S Corp or the C Corp. But yeah, the LLC is such an easy way to go and still protect yourself. That's it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for adding that. And so as we dive slightly deeper into this LLC, Franny, you started talking a little bit about some of the steps that would hypothetically be needed by an entrepreneur if they were filing in a particular state. Can we dive deeper into what steps are needed to actually register? So from the moment you say, I need an LLC, I'm not in the zero liability zone, like Sherry said, what is that first step?
Sure, absolutely. So the hardest step, I will tell all of you, is coming up with a name for your LLC. So, and Sherry, I know that you would be able to talk about this in much better detail than I could ever possibly imagine. But let's say, for example, you have developed this incredible running shoe, right? And you're just like, I'm going to go to market with it. And you say, you know what? There's this Greek god named Nike. And, I bet I could do a Nike running shoe. And you do, Nike Running Shoes LLC. So what's the problem with that?
Yeah,
Other than
that is they're going to get their butt sued really
there we go.
quickly.
That's exactly it. So the first step is really, once you come up with a name, do a Google search and make sure. Also, there's another resource. If you look at the US trademark website, then again, you can take a look to see, like, is this a name that's already been taken, right? So, and with the name Nike, I'm pretty sure that they've locked up just about everything you can think of. So shoes, shorts, clothing, you name it, and they've probably locked it up. So if you're doing anything with athletics and the word Nike, there's a good chance that you're just asking to be sued. And all the money that you've developed as far as putting your branding together has now been for nothing. So do a quick, Google search to make sure, hey, I have come up with what I think is this, the most amazing idea ever. Let's just do a Google search to see if it's already been taken. Is the domain available? Because, a lot of businesses nowadays want that web presence. So is the domain available? Is it something, again, that you're going to look to be building this brand? So once you've established that, the next step would be to determine what state, where are you going to file? So I live in Pennsylvania, so, I could accept what's called service of process, which just means that if the state were to send me mail, I could accept it at my home address. So the easiest step for me would be to file a Pennsylvania LLC. If I lived in New Jersey, I would consider a New Jersey LLC. If I lived in Maryland, again, the same thing. So look to see where you live and where you're going to sell. Your either your services or your actual products. And that's where you want to make sure that you get established. So then look to the Secretary of State's office And what you want to do is file either, depending on the state that you're in, either a certificate of formation or articles of formation. And what that does when you file it with the Secretary of State is that actually creates the legal entity that, that is your LLC. So are you done then? No. The next step would be, again, just like Elliot had mentioned in the chat, the next step would be to get your EIN. So, and I think that that's perfect, is thinking of your EIN as your social security number for your business. So when you go to a bank, the bank is going to say, do you have your filed copy of either your certificate of formation or your articles of formation? And you're going to want to make sure you bring that. The next thing they're going to ask for is your EIN letter. So your letter from the IRS that says this is the, EIN that's associated with this business. The next thing that they're going to ask for is your operating agreement. So your operating agreement is similar to a corporation's bylaws. It's your governing document that says this is the way that this business is going to be run. Now you might be sitting here saying, why do I need a separate document? It's just me, right? So I can say how my business is being run. Well, the difference is again, if we're looking at the silos, your business can't speak for itself. The way that your business speaks for itself is through the documents that are generated. So that's why this operating agreement is so important. The operating agreement talks about what's the address of your business? What's the purpose of your business? How will your business be treated for tax purposes? When will you get a distribution? Who are the members of your operating agreement? Who is authority to sign on your operating agreement? So you're going to have an operating agreement. You're going to sign once as the member. You're going to sign, if it's just you, once as the member, once as, on behalf of the actual organization. And now, now you're in good shape, and now you're ready to go to the bank to then open up a bank account. Jerry, did you want to add anything to that?
Agree with everything that Franny said. I'd like to just expound a little bit more on the whole naming process, because it's probably the most important thing you're ever going to do for your business is choose that name. So once you've picked a name, or you have maybe a couple names that you're tossing around and you're trying to figure out what to call this business, I suggest Google search, definitely. If you start, and social media search, if you start seeing other companies on Google or social media using that name, you might want to go back to the drawing board. What Franny was mentioning about the USPTO, if you look on their website, they have a search engine called TESS. And under TESS, you can put in the name that you're thinking about using, and it will come back and tell you if there are any registered trademarks or any trademarks currently pending using that name. But you don't want to look at just exactly your name. You want to look at if you pluralized it, if you used a synonym for a major word in your name, because for the USPTO purposes, and for infringement purposes, it doesn't have to be exact. It has to be confusingly similar. So if you're coming up with a name that is really, really close to somebody else's registered trademark, you want to step away and never mind, because that can get you in trouble down the line. Where it gets you in trouble down the line is you pick this name, you go and you file it with your state. You start doing all the fun branding stuff. You get your website up, you do business cards, you do brochures. You can spend a lot of money on that stuff, and you start doing all your branding. And then you get out there and you start selling and making a name for yourself. And then suddenly goes, hey, wait a minute, somebody out there who has a trademark says, where did you come from? And guess what? I'm sending you a cease and desist letter because that's my name, or it's too close to my name. And now all that money that you spent setting up is like poof, gone. And you have to start over. And it's really a position you'd like to avoid. So you really want to do the research up front to make sure that that name you want to use is available. Some of the really good clues that it's not, if it's all over social media, if you find something that or something similar on the USPTO website if the domain name is taken. Now, watch when you're looking at the domain names, because the .com version, if that's taken, could just be somebody took it and parked it and it's not actually being used. But actually look it up and see if you get a result, because if the .com version of your name is taken, again, red flag, time to go back to the drawing board. So that name is really like, it's going to take your business and your branding into the next level. So that's where you really want to be careful as you're getting started.
I'm not sure I understand.
Sorry about my watch.
It's okay.
Mm.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that and going a little bit deeper around the naming. I did put the test tool USPTO website in the chat for those of you who want to check it out. And thank you for sharing that tool. So a few more questions before we get to the Q&A. I see that the chat is very lively. I appreciate everybody's engagement there. The next question is around taxes. We do have a tax expert in the audience, so feel free to chime in, Richard, if you're able to on this one. But the question is, can you please describe some of the tax implications of forming an LLC? So how does it actually work? I've heard the term pass through. Can we break it down into layman's terms into what that actually means and what those implications are for entrepreneurs who want to start an LLC?
Sure. I mean, I'm happy to take this one. So, as you know, as far as a pass through, it doesn't mean that you don't pay taxes on the money that you bring in. That would be so great, but unfortunately, the tax code doesn't make it quite that simple. When we talk about the funds passing through to the individual, what that means is that when you are filing your tax returns, what you include as part of your tax returns is what's called a Schedule C. And that is for, business income that you're bringing in. So what you're going to do, again, because you attended this session and you're going to do everything right when you get your business started, is you're going to set up that separate bank account, and all of your revenues, all of your expenses, everything's going to go into that bank account. And so when you're filing your taxes at the end of the year and you're putting together that Schedule C, what you're going to do is you're going to look to see, this is the money that came in, this is the money that went out as far as expenses. The net amount, what's left over, is what you're then being taxed on. And so you're being taxed on it as an individual based on the money that's being brought in. So unlike a C corp, where you're taxed as a corporation, and then you're taxed on any distributions that are made from that, from this perspective and through the LLC, you're just being taxed once on your individual tax rate.
And Richard, since you're the expert, feel free to correct me if I'm remembering this wrong from the way my accountant put it to me when I was first filing as an LLC, is that the business revenue is recognized as your income, your taxable income, right? So you're just not filing taxes for yourself and for your business. They are considered one and the same.
Yes. First, I apologize. I don't know why my camera's not working. I'm trying, Joyce, but
Oh, it's all good.
I'm
Just a ghost in the
tonight.
machine.
Yes, I think so. I'm attending strictly as a consumer, and this is a wonderful discussion. I've learned quite a bit from, I always enjoy listening to the attorneys and an actual business owner talk about LLCs. And the point that you just made, Elliot, about if it's what we call a single member LLC. So one owner who has established the LLC for the reasons that each of you described, the importance of liability protection, then when it comes to filing your federal taxes, you're taking that income, the gross income, the business expenses, the net income, reporting it on the Schedule C, as you mentioned, and then pulling it into your 1040. So in terms of filing your taxes, it's a much more streamlined process than if one were filing as a corporation, whether C corporation or S corp. So as far as the IRS is concerned, we're not all that concerned about tracking LLCs. In fact, I'll let you in on a little secret. I have access to a lot of internal data in the IRS, and we share a lot of it publicly. But to my knowledge, we do track the number of Schedule C filers across the country every year, but we don't track that portion of the Schedule C that are LLCs. That's tracked probably at the state level because as Sherry and Franny were indicating, you establish an LLC at the state level. So long story short, I agree with everything you said. It's simple. I do like your observation, Elliot, as your business is growing and gross revenue and net revenue for that matter is increasing. When you talk to a qualified accountant who focuses on small businesses, then that individual may want to begin a discussion about making an election or a choice with the IRS to have your LLC file as a subchapter S corporation. And there, without getting too deep into the weeds for tonight's discussion, there are some tax planning opportunities for profitable LLCs, single member, or if it were a partnership that created an LLC, then electing with IRS in a fairly simple process to be an S corp. So that's sort of intermediate tax planning. And that just goes to the point you were making, Elliot. I loved when you said have your advisor, both your legal advisor and your accounting advisor, which is so important from the get-go. And you have two very qualified legal advisors and probably tax advisors here tonight. So I agree with everything you said, Elliot.
Cool.
Thank
Didn't
you.
want to be giving any false information.
Thank you, Richard, for chiming in, and to Franny and Sherry for that explanation. So in the chat, there were a couple of questions around, branding and possibly, acquiring businesses or using a separate brand, or, let's talk about the DBA, doing business as, or the fictitious name. What is a DBA, and what type of business should try to leverage this option as opposed to creating a brand new LLC? So we'll start with Sherry on this one. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the DBA and when it's best to use it.
Okay. The first way you would want to, so first off, in Pennsylvania, the DBA is called a fictitious name registration. And basically its purpose is to let the world know if you're using a name other than your own personal name in business, let the rest of the world know who they're doing business with so they know what name to put on a lawsuit when they go to sue you. That's really its purpose. The reason why a lot of small business owners file it is they think that's going to protect their name and give them some rights to it. But in actuality, it does not. If you file a fictitious name registration and someone else comes along and wants to file for an LLC or a C Corp with that name, your fictitious name registration will not stop them. They will be allowed to file with that name. So the fictitious name registration works for a sole proprietor who is operating under a name other than their own name. So if you've determined you don't want to file an LLC for whatever reason, but you do want to use a different name for your business than your own name, then you're legally required to file that fictitious name registration so the rest of the world knows who they're doing business with. Beyond that, you can use fictitious names if you, let's say, have an LLC, but you want to have like different divisions of it. You can create different names that you're doing business as under that LLC. That's another way to use it. Again, doesn't protect those names. In in terms of choosing that over an LLC, I'm with Franny. I never would. I would advise all of my clients to file for the LLC, because not only does it protect you legally, but it also protects your use of that name in the state of Pennsylvania, if that's where you're filing. It doesn't protect you nationwide. The only thing that's going to protect you nationwide is a trademark filing. But the use of the fictitious name registration, and the way I see it, is very limited in terms of its value. It's legally required if you're using a name other than your own and you're not set up as a business, as like an LLC or a C Corp. As an entity.
Got it.
Yeah, if we're being completely honest, I really don't like fictitious names. And I can't emphasize that enough. I really, really don't like them. I find that individuals will file for the fictitious name with the idea that eventually they'll file for the LLC, and then you get busy with your business, right? Because that's what you do very well. And you forget about the fact that this fictitious name really does not give you any standing whatsoever. So then you build this brand, and then someone comes along and files for an LLC. And now all of a sudden they have an LLC under the brand that you've worked to create, and you have very minimal legal standing for it. So I think that, along the lines of what Sherry was saying, I just, the fictitious name offers very little to you in that way. So even if you're an LLC, even if you rush to form your LLC and you say, I'm just going to go with ABC Consulting because it's easy, and then I'm going to get a fictitious name to really define what I'm doing, like Computer Consulting LLC. So the issue then becomes is that if your fictitious name is Computer Consulting and you build it up really well, someone can come in and form Computer Consulting LLC, and now all of that hard work that you've put in is for nothing. So whenever I'm working with new clients, especially when they're looking to start a business, we always have the discussion of how to build a very solid foundation, right? So I think I saw in the chat, someone was asking about getting a registered agent to start the LLC. And while depending on the registered agent, you can do that, I think that there's always a concern when your first option is to, go to a registered agent or something like that, because I've seen those operating agreements where they're very generic, very basic. They're not, either Pennsylvania specific or Maryland specific or New Jersey specific. And they don't always have some of the necessary provisions and terms that should be in there that really help to protect you. So it's so much easier to start, again, when you're starting your business, building your foundation on the right foot, as opposed to just saying, let's just check the box, try to get this done. Again, I've seen people who've Googled what is an operating agreement. They've pulled it off the internet, because that does happen, and, crossed out the name that was on there and put in the name of their business. Well, sometimes that operating agreement is for a different state, or sometimes there are specific provisions in there as far as like restricted stock or, just other crazy terms or provisions that aren't necessarily relevant. So the best thing that I could say to you is to, just as Elliot was saying, find who your trusted professionals will be. Find your trusted accountant, find your trusted business attorney, establish a relationship with them, because setting up your LLC is not going to be the only time that you're going to have to work with an attorney or work with an accountant. So as you start getting tons of orders in, as you start entering services agreements, as you're looking for insurance, you're going to want to make sure
As you're hiring employees, which our next session we'll talk
Exactly.
about, and writing an employee handbook. These are all things you're going to consult with your
Yep.
experts about.
Absolutely. So making sure as you're filing for your trademark, as your business grows, you want to make sure that you have those trusted professionals in place so that you can work with them, so that it isn't something where you say, I don't know if I should contact an attorney about this. They're so expensive. and then you file your Nike running shoes and Nike is slapping you with a ridiculous lawsuit. And now, taking away your business. So again, just making sure that you put that foundation in place so that you can move forward.
Quick, while we're on this subject of finding those experts, Franny and Sherry, someone asked about like best practices for finding those experts who you can trust and who are accredited and knowledgeable and qualified.
I liken it to hiring finding a doctor. When you move to a new area and you need a doctor, what do? You talk to your friends, your family, whoever's around you, coworkers. What doctor do you use? Do you like them? Where are they located? Whatever. And then you go onto Google and you search and you look for doctors near me and you get a bunch of names and you look at their websites. And you can tell a lot about what a practice is like by looking at their website. Are they up to date? Are they relevant? Is the messaging resonating with you? Does it appear that they are providing the types of services you're looking for? And if it's not clear from their website, that's problematic to me. With attorneys specifically, you can call your local bar association and ask for referrals if you're not getting what you need from friends, family, coworkers. Once you have a list of people, like I said, you look at their websites, you look at their social media, you see if their messaging and who they appear to be resonates with you, and you narrow your list down. Then you pick 1 or 2 or 3 to call, and you see what it's like when you talk to them. If they offer a free initial consultation, go ahead and book it and actually talk with them or meet with them and see if you feel comfortable with them. Because when you're going to be talking to them about your business, you're going to be telling them a lot of very kind of personal things, because this business is your baby that you're running, and you're going to need to be disclosing like who's your problem child who's not paying their bills when you send them out, and who's what's going on. And it's not always reactive. I like to work with my clients proactively, like what's going on, what else is coming up, what new products or services are you going to be looking at, and do we need to do anything proactively to deal with that? So you just want like that level of comfort when you're talking to them. So once you've made an appointment and talked to a couple, I think you're going to have the sense of who's a good fit for you. That's really the way I look at it. The same way you would vet anything else, the same way you would vet dating. Like, you're going on an app, you're right and left, like sliding people out of the way. And then you're picking a couple and you're reaching out and you're talking to them and you're chatting with them and you're getting a feel for who they are. And, maybe at that point you're like wiping them off the screen, and eventually you're narrowing down to who is going to be a good fit for you.
Perfect.
Thank you. I'll pass
I
it on
also
to
wanted
Melanie.
to jump. Yeah, I
Yeah,
just
I was
wanted
going
to
to
jump
pass it
in.
over.
Thank you. I just wanted to jump in and say something, because someone had mentioned about going online and getting operating agreements and that sort of thing. And what's the best way to find them? To me, the best way to find them is hire a small business attorney and have them to create it for you. So
Yeah, Melanie, that's.
Yes.
I think
Oh,
Franny might be
yeah.
frozen.
Yeah.
What we'll do is, since we're at 6:50 and what this conversation is so amazing, I'd love to get final words of. Oh, Franny, you're back. Did you have something you wanted to add?
You froze for a bit there.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I agreed with Melanie in that don't pull things off the internet, because you're going to get yourself in trouble.
Yes, yes.
Or if you do, at least bring it to your attorney for review.
Yeah.
At the very least.
So with that said, why don't we go into our last question, which is really final words of wisdom from Sherry and Franny. Once we do that, we have a lot of questions to get to. So we'll start with Franny, final words of wisdom, and then Sherry, and then we'll hop right into the chat. Take it away, Franny.
Thanks. I would say build your team. So this isn't something that you're going to be doing by yourself. So build your team of professionals, right? So Who are you going to call when you have legal questions, when you have accounting questions, when you have marketing questions, when you have website, internet design questions? So start putting your team together, because those are going to be your trusted resources. If you try to go into this thinking you have to do everything by yourself, you're going to be exhausted, and it's not going to be something that's sustainable. So start making your list, start putting those names together. Know that you can pick up the phone, reach out to that person, and don't let those be your roadblock. So don't let it be something where you say, I have no idea how to create a website. Who do you contact to figure out how you help build a website and get moving forward?
Thank you. And Sherry.
So I agree again with Franny on building the team, and I want to say specifically include in your team legal, insurance, finance, and tax advisors. And the reason why I am singling those out is those are the areas where a single mistake, a single misstep, not understanding the law, not understanding how the finances work, can end you up in legal trouble. You could end up being sued. You could end up losing your business. Worst case scenario, you could end up in jail. And we really don't want any of that to happen. So in those areas, this is not a place to skimp, not a place to play armchair lawyer and DIY. This is a place where you, honest to God, need the help. So when you're assembling that team that Franny was talking about, make sure you have your business lawyer, your accountant, your tax preparer, those people on there, somebody that you trust to tell you what insurance you need to make sure that you're covered for your business, so that you don't end up in any of the horror scenarios that we hear about all the time for small businesses.